I have also as well to congratulate the OECD team. I think it's a really comprehensive. It does show kind of literature on nearly all the sources of development finance, and I'm aware it's not an easy job, and I really encourage you to read it. I think it's going to become a reference for the debate towards the Financing for Development Conference. But I need to add 3 different points which I think shouldn't be overlooked in the narrative and commitments towards the Financing for Development Conference next July in Addis. I said the report is very comprehensive in describing trends, characteristics of the different sources of development finance, nearly all of them. But they're not perfect substitute. And also, partner countries' governments do have preferences and priorities for the terms and conditions. I'm probably not the best person to answer for this, but we actually, myself, colleagues at ODI, also Bironde and colleagues at the OECD, we traveled in the last couple of years to 9 countries in Asia, Pacific, Sub-Saharan Africa, and we asked government officials what their preferences on terms and conditions of development finance were. First element that came up was ownership. The second one was alignment to national priorities, in particular infrastructure. Again, nothing really surprising if we think about the kind of pillars of the principles on aid effectiveness. The third one was slightly more interesting, and there was the request for speed of delivery. And sometimes there was a preference for projects that were dispersed more quickly at the expense of good financial terms and conditions, if there was a trade-off. And some of the providers actually do score quite well against this criteria, and notably these are the non-DAC donors. In a sense, we have seen the presence of more actors in the arena for development finance. We call it in the project an age of choice. Was actually welcome, and there were limited concerns around fragmentation. And we also seen that actually the presence of more providers increased the negotiating capital of partner country governments vis-a-vis traditional donors. And in some countries like Cambodia and Ethiopia, where we worked a couple of years ago, actually we had evidence suggesting that they've been able also to secure better outcomes against their priorities. Let me go to my second point. I mean, in the report, there's an interesting figure about the philanthropic assistance at global level. In 2012, it's about 30 billion, so it's 1/5 of ODA. But actually, in the work that we've done in the 9 countries, we haven't seen that much going on. I mean, philanthropic assistance flows that we mapped were more or less 1% of ODA they were receiving in that year. We probably may have picked up the wrong countries. Most of the flows are transferred from philanthropic organizations to multilateral organizations to trust funds, very much alike ODA. But a similar story was found also for the case of climate finance. I won't go into the debate of what climate finance is. Most of it is actually ODA, but we haven't seen many flows, or at least in the countries that we work on. There was a common partner, however, coming up. Nearly all the government officials we talked to actually demanded for greater capacity, both to participate in the international fora, but also to kind of apply for multilateral climate funds. In other words, we found that climate finance was demand constrained. And let me go to my third and final point. We said it was really clear also in the initial presentations, not all the flows are the same, but some of them do create liabilities. And I was slightly surprised actually in the report to see the mention of keeping that as a sustainable level mentioned only once, actually in the chapter on ODA. Yes, the debt ratios are pretty low at the moment. I mean, it's partially also the effect of the debt relief initiatives of sustained growth over the last decade. But I think this is the kind of tip of the iceberg. I mean, in some countries, debt ratios are increasing. Ghana and Senegal are notable examples. But also, as that was probably the only development finance flow that wasn't covered in the report. But in the last decade, 11 sub-Saharan African countries have actually issued international sovereign bonds for the first time, and others are about to join. I mean, Kenya in June, there are plans from Uganda, there are plans from Ethiopia. Generally, they're kind of linked to infrastructure financing. But there's a problem. Their kind of terms are quite not necessarily that favorable. We're talking about average annual interest rates of nearly 2 digits, and they are US dollar denominated, meaning that they are exposed to exchange rate fluctuations. So if I can kind of wrap up 3 different points, I would say, first of all, let's not forget the demand side. I mean, partner countries do have preferences for the terms of conditions of development finance. Second point, we need to better understand the picture of the different development finance flows at global level and what actually partner countries receive. And also we need to better understand the capacity building needs that these countries have. And finally, more resources to partner countries shouldn't lay the foundations for another debt trap. Thank you.